Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong opposition to this amendment. My Republican colleagues continue to argue against this so-called wokeism in the military. I ask my colleagues, can they define what being woke is? According to the Florida governor's own legal team, it's defined as, quote, the belief there are systemic injustices in American society and the need to address them, unquote. Mr. Speaker, I have news for my colleagues. We need to be woke. We have decades and centuries of injustices and inequities heaped upon women, LGBTQ+ community, Black and Latino, Native American and Asian, and so many other populations in our nation. Mr. Speaker, and while the Republicans and their friends across the country try to ban books and erase our history from school textbooks, we are fighting to defend the truth and our history. And yes, I am woke, and more of my colleagues need to be woke. I yield, and I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman is recognized.
Fact is, these positions are consuming precious dollars that our Air Force can't even use currently to pay their own personnel, that many in the military are struggling to even find a way to pay the bonuses for our current personnel and can't even meet their own recruiting needs right now, falling woefully short in all of their recruiting needs. The fact is, we're struggling in recruiting in significant part because we're turning the Defense Department into a social engineering experiment wrapped in a uniform. That's the truth. Instead of focusing on killing people and blowing stuff up and having the finest fighting force in the world, we're focused on dividing people up by race. That's what we're doing. If you look at all of the training materials, the Air Force Academy, the training materials at West Point, the training materials at the Naval Academy, they are chock full of this, spending time on that. And it is driving people away from wanting to serve. It is driving people of all races away from wanting to serve because we're focusing on race and division rather than unifying our United States military behind the flag of the United States. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Massachusetts, the whip of the Democratic Party, Whip Clark.
Gentlelady from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ever since the Minutemen gathered in Lexington, America's armed forces have been guardians of freedom. Generations of heroes have signed up for a singular cause, preserving liberty for all. And regardless of party or politics, the House has come together every year to put our national security and our military families first, until now. This year, the MAGA majority is using our national defense bill to get one step closer to the only thing they really care about, a nationwide abortion ban. Mr. Speaker, Americans are already paying the price for Republicans' extremism. Americans like Amanda Zarowski, who rushed to the hospital last year after suffering a miscarriage. Amanda needed an abortion procedure to prevent a deadly infection, but her doctor sent her home, banned under Texas law from providing the care she needed. So she waited, mourning her daughter that she had lost until she went into septic shock, ended up in the ICU for 3 days, and almost lost her life. Now MAGA Republicans are aiming the same dangerous extremism at our troops. They want the same control over the health, body, and lives of America's service members and their families. That's not freedom. That's not patriotism. That's not national security. That's tyranny. I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman is recognized.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the ranking 1 minute and 30 seconds to the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee.
Ranking member is recognized.
Thank you. And I want to answer the most important question. What does this have to do with national security? It has to do with unit cohesion and with recruitment. And interestingly, the survey data shows that almost 3 times as many people say they are worried about joining the military because of their concerns about discrimination as say that they're worried about the military being too woke. That is the point of this. The training is to make sure there is unit cohesion, number one, and number two, that we can recruit from the entire country. It really comes down to whether or not you believe that we have a history of discrimination against people of color, the LGBTQ community, and women. If you think that that just didn't happen and we don't have to worry about it, then I guess this approach makes sense. But the history of our country tells a very different story. We need to address this in order to make sure that if you are a woman, if you are a black person, if you are trans or gay, the military is going to give you a fair shake. And let me remind everybody here that just 13 years ago, we finally allowed gay people to serve in the military. Every single Republican voted against that. Every single one. Do we really think that our national security would be stronger if we drove all the gay people out of the military? We need all the resources, all the talents from this country, and regrettably, we haven't always done that. And what is shown, we need to address these issues. Now, the Republicans exaggerate this. They act like this is all we do in recruitment. I've spent a lot of time with a lot of military people. This is not all we do in training the military. It is something that needs to be done to meet our recruitment goals.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman is recognized.
We're prepared to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
So, recent story, service members forced to pay back signing bonuses after being removed after COVID vaccine. They see it as a kick in the face. Air Force delays bonuses higher than projected personnel costs are driving a shortfall in FY23 military personnel appropriation. Meanwhile, we have jobs and notices under the Chief Diversity Officer and myriad other positions at $183,500. Why? Why can't we get it right? Why can't we do the right thing and use the dollars that we have appropriated to fund the men and women in uniform to do their job? That's the question. And the fact is, what we're doing is we're funding things like a professor at the Air Force Academy posting about her desire to make students learn how to, quote, identify the structural racism and inequality that has been endemic in American history. A West Point slide obtained by a FOIA stated that, quote, white people and people of color live radically different structured lives, and that in order to understand racial inequality, it's first necessary to address whiteness. That's what we're paying for, rather than paying for men and women to defend this country. I yield back.
Gentleman is recognized.
Speaker, my Republican colleagues insist that government should run more like a business, yet they're focused on creating divisions in the military instead of following the same practices as our best defense companies. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Raytheon, who all have a chief diversity officer role or equivalent. We are in the middle of a recruitment crisis. Mr. Speaker, instead of championing programs that will make it more enticing for underrepresented Americans to join the service, they are instead trying to make it more difficult for our military recruitment efforts to be successful. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this ill-advised amendment. Let's put our service members, our national security, and their needs ahead of this amendment that does nothing but divide our country, divide our military. Let's continue to have the strength in our military, and that strength comes from the diversity of our service members. With that, I yield back.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Gentleman from Texas.
That's for recorded vote.
Recorded vote has been requested pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas will be postponed.